if I was OpenAI, I would want to have the 3 largest supercomputers in the world, 1, 2, and 3. Google can be at place 4. Microsoft can be at 5. And every top researcher would want to work at your lab because they would be able to train the largest models and do the most interesting things.
Today I'm here with Jack in Berkeley, and we're filming a video about AI, or a vlog, because from my perspective, I woke up this morning looking at the YouTube comments on my Twitter, and saw one guy who said that he wished me good luck for my 30 days and 30 video challenge, but he also said it had a messy bed. So it is a messy hair. And I decided to just like go meet this guy in Berkeley, which is like 1 hour train from what I was saying, to like hear his takes about AI and alignment. And so I'm just like curious if you can tell me like, like how did you find the channel? If you like watch any videos, what do you think? Or like what's your whole relationship with AI risk? That's like a lot of questions, but whatever you feel like it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I'm chronically online, as the Gen Z people say. I just like watch every YouTube video, read like from every interesting Twitter account about
You're Gen Z.
AGI. I guess I'm technically Gen Z by like a few months or something. I'm 23. 1999. Yeah.
And so how did you find my videos? How did you enter this like world?
Yeah, it was actually this AGI system called YouTube's recommender algorithm started pushing of his videos up to me, and they're super interesting.
So YouTube is AGI?
Sure, like in a very casual sense, maybe. Certainly understands what I want to look at.
And so you told me that you were also like you also like read Superintelligence a long time ago when it was like when you were 14. Is that
16? It came out when I was 14. I was like too busy doing whatever 14-year-olds do. And but when I was 16, I read the book and just felt like I immediately have to work in this space. I noticed very obviously, I think everybody did, that there was going to be this imbalance between huge investments in AI capabilities, AGI capabilities, and very small investment in AI safety and alignment. So what I decided I would do is, let's try and make a ton of money doing a startup, and then we could help fund alignment and safety. My expectation was that was not going to work. Most founders fail, and I was extremely young, and that's what happened, exactly as I expected. But it was still a cool experience. I learned a lot about managing teams and just building a company and working on technical projects.
So now you went from making trying to make a lot of money to fund alignment research to like learning about AI. So are you still trying to make a lot of money, or are you just like trying to like learn about AI right now?
No, I'm really comfortable like having no money or very little money. I just want to like enjoy life and do some interesting, important stuff before superintelligence kind of takes over the world.
When is that?
Obviously, it's like extremely hard to predict when that might happen. I think like the language model paradigm is going to matter a lot. I see a lot of ways that they could be made to be significantly more powerful without even improving on the base model. A good example of this is OpenAI's fine-tuning on API calls and function calling. Which will allow the model to use a lot of tools that it otherwise, isn't able to use very consistently or can't use very well. Now it's very good at calling those functions and using those external tools. I expect a large orchestra of all these tools will be built over the next 3 years that will make the base models much more powerful than they are on their own. And then in addition to that, we're going to have GPT-5 in the next 3 years likely. And when we plug that much more powerful base model into this orchestra of tools that make the language model more powerful, it's hard to predict what that will produce. It could produce something much more powerful than what we have today that could be a potential input to future systems. A lot of the leaders of the largest labs have been talking about synthetic data, basically using model-produced data to train the next generation models. I think that this could go a lot further than most people are expecting. I think that you could set up a situation where you're having the model solve specific problems, and when it successfully solves those problems, you're including that in the training data for the next model or fine-tuning on that data. And I think you could push the performance of the model a lot further by using that sort of synthetic data.
So concretely, I think the thing you were saying before to me was that you could use like code interpreters or mass proof checkers and those kind of things to create more data. So do you wanna explain this in more detail?
Sure, yeah. I think that for certain problems where it's easier to...
My hand is chilling here. Yeah.
I think for certain problems where it's easier to judge if a solution is correct than it is to create the initial solution. For instance, you mentioned using code interpreters to, evaluate code produced by a model. I think that's a good way that you could have the model itself, or in an automated way at least, do the feedback or select what model outputs would be included in the next training run or fine-tuned on. You could automate that process by using a code interpreter or having the model itself evaluate the solution. And in that way, you could produce a very, very large volume of data that you would maybe not be able to get through using human feedback, because there are just limitations on how much feedback humans can give.
And one counterpoint I was giving you was that why isn't OpenAI, Microsoft, Google already doing this? Or if they're doing it, why don't already have like godlike AI at coding?
Yeah, I think it just takes a while to produce that volume of data from this. They're building their enormous new compute cluster using H100s, and I'm sure a lot of what they're going to be using that cluster for is producing synthetic data to train the next generation models. I think that they are doing this. I think when they talk about synthetic data, this is part of what they're talking about, is the model evaluating a solution or an output and determining whether or not it's going to be included in the next training run, and using outside tools to augment that process and make sure that the model is creating a correct judgment on that.
So if it requires like a lot of compute to do like all these inferences, and a lot of this inference doesn't work because it will produce like an incorrect output, and so it won't really give any useful information to the model. It won't be like a grand truth saying like, oh, this code works or this proof works, right? So what we're saying is that maybe like you need to like try 100 times or like 1,000 times, and one of these will work out.
Yeah, so you're saying if the problem is like sufficiently difficult that the model isn't producing a correct output a large percentage of the time, such that it needs to produce like 1,000 outputs before it gets to the correct solution, and that would be very costly from a compute perspective and would maybe make it infeasible. My response to that would be just train on easier problems, and then gradually you could increase the difficulty of the problems as the model gets better and better at solving those sorts of problems as you're in a recursive way fine-tuning it.
So I guess my kind of like larger point is if the task become like too difficult, at some point we're going to like reach a threshold where even with like millions of retries, the model isn't able to produce the correct output because it doesn't have the capacity in some way. Like, this is like more like an hypothesis or something. Maybe there's like at some point you need like a different architecture, or you need like a different.
I think at some point you maybe just need like more weights in your model or more layers in your model, so that way you can solve more complex problems. But at the end of the day, if you're able to create like millions and millions of examples of correct solutions to programming problems, if that's the example we're using, you will be able to use that all as training data for a much larger model that would probably be able to solve the more difficult set of problems. And I imagine that if this is like a recursive process of fine-tuning a very large model on these difficult programming problems, that you would always just stay like right at the edge of the capabilities of the model, something that's like a little bit difficult that maybe takes it 10 tries to get, but doesn't take it 100 tries. And as it gets better and better at solving those problems, you can just slightly increase the problem difficulty and do that very gradually to scale it up to much greater performance, and eventually probably well beyond human performance at solving different programming problems.
So you're bullish on scale being all we need?
To some extent. I think that there is some truth to saying, if you're training on human level data, you're never going to be able to exceed that, no matter how much data you consume. If it's only at human level, how are you going to get way past that? I think the way that you could get past that is through the synthetic data, where you're having it solve increasingly difficult problems and evaluating whether or not it arrived at a solution to that problem. And it comes down to this idea that it's easier to evaluate whether a solution is correct than it is to create the novel solution the first time. And that will allow you to recursively and in an automated way collect more and more data of that sort.
So do you think all the like top AI labs are currently like working on synthetic data right now? They're like all bullish on this and trying to scale it up?
I've heard almost all of them. I don't have the names in front of me, but I've heard almost all the leaders at the major labs talk about this on some level. And I could be totally wrong about the implementation. I probably am. But this is just my take and what I would maybe do if I was in their position, or something I would try if I had access.
So if you're like CEO of OpenAI or Microsoft right now, you would just like order to build more GPU cluster to do more synthetic data?
Oh, I think this is something I definitely want to talk about. I think that the lab that has the most compute can get the best researchers, because the best researchers want to train on the largest clusters. And so if I was OpenAI, I would be raising much more than $10 billion and just trying.
How much would you raise?
So I would give up like no equity, and I would do it all through their capped profit structure where they're giving profits away. I would raise like $100 billion right now. You'd have way more than anybody else, and just basically buy out the entire GPU production supply that NVIDIA and TSMC can provide you with.
Why haven't they like raised $100 billion? What's the best argument for this?
Maybe it's hard to sell people on that they're close to AGI yet. Like I think if people really felt that they were very close to AGI and felt that in a visceral way, then they would be willing to cough up pretty much any amount of money to get a part of the profits from that. And with AGI, you can promise pretty much as much of a profit cap as you want. You could do 100x or 1000x. As long as it's not infinity profit, which is, I think, the whole point of OpenAI structure, is to avoid creating this paradigm where you have even the ability to have infinite profit, when the amounts that you could make off of a superintelligence could just be so enormous.
I feel like you could be like more like I don't know if you heard of like Pascal mugging. Like it's like when you promise some like huge amounts, and it's like like even if it's like small.
Yeah, so you're promising this enormous sum of money, and it's like, okay, well, that's totally unrealistic. But never going to get that.
In expected value, it makes sense. Because
yeah, well, if we're talking about superintelligence, it's kind of easy to imagine like completely arbitrary sums of money that you'd be able to make off of such of a system. Yeah, that's my response. Pascal's wager, that whole thing. Yeah. I'm familiar. I was just reading up on it yesterday, actually. I do think it somewhat applies, but superintelligence is such an obvious thing that we are racing towards. And OpenAI is clearly the leader in building AGI. So, if you're going to give money to somebody, if you're going to invest in somebody, it should probably be them, right?
But right now, I think it's impossible to invest in OpenAI, right?
Invest in a typical sense. I think, their capped profit is kind of like a debt instrument in that you owe someone this return on their investment. And so as OpenAI makes money, they owe that money to the people who invested in them up to a certain cap. I think that makes tons of sense. It doesn't allow the investors to have any control over what the organization does, but it allows them to profit off of their investment, and it allows OpenAI to raise huge amounts of money to invest in compute. And I think that, if I was OpenAI, I would want to have the 3 largest supercomputers in the world, 1, 2, and 3. Google can be at place 4. Microsoft can be at 5. And every top researcher would want to work at your lab because they would be able to train the largest models and do the most interesting things. If I was OpenAI, I would want to monopolize compute. I think that they should be investing much more in compute than they are right now. So it's not that I think compute is everything. Obviously, if you have like a significant algorithmic advance that supersedes anyone's compute budget relative to yours, then maybe that's a better competitive edge. Although I would be a little concerned that information could leak out to the other labs. So I don't think it's maybe as strong of a competitive moat as people might think. However, yeah, if I was OpenAI and I see that Inflection, this kind of relative newcomer relative to them, raised $1.3 billion, which is more than 10% of what OpenAI has raised over their history as a company, I would be a little bit worried. If I was OpenAI, I would want to have like 50 times more compute than any of these smaller newcomer companies. And I would be extremely aggressively pushing for that pretty much above everything else.
I think one of the main problems is that so you said something about like raised 100 billion, right? But like Microsoft only has what?
How much cash they have?
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe less than
So
70 billion or
from
something.
Apple, I would raise from Microsoft, I would raise from Saudi Aramco, I would raise from pretty much everybody, but give them no board seats or anything in OpenAI. Just give them this sort of like debt instrument where, you know, you owe them their profit cap, like their capped profit. You owe them that for all of the profits that you will generate in the future.
The thing is they managed to raise that much money because Microsoft owns everything, and that's the condition, right? And so that's how they make all this progress very fast, is because they have all this money, and they have all this money because Microsoft wanted to like not have other people invest, right?
Okay.
Wasn't that the plan?
Yeah, I obviously haven't seen what their deal looks like or what the contract they're operating under looks like. That's not publicly disclosed. But yeah, so I guess there could be some limitations on who they can raise money from. I would be surprised if they lock themselves in a situation where they can only raise money from Microsoft, and Microsoft's the only company that can build their compute clusters, because you're really just putting a lot of faith in one group of people to like determine the entire fate of your company.
And at the end of the day, humanity's future.
Yeah, and humanity's future. Yeah, I think if your investors really believe you're going to build AGI, you can probably raise like as much money as you want. The way I see it, they raised this 10 billion so they can build a successor model, GPT-5, that's way more powerful than 4, and they'll be able to demonstrate how powerful it is and how close they are to AGI, and because of that, they'll be able to raise, the 100 billion next. And I guess they probably feel like, they wouldn't even know how to deploy $100 billion right now. And
would you?
10 billion is sufficient. The way I would deploy that kind of money is to overpay for GPUs so that I can get every GPU coming off the line.
Do you think there's like $100 billion of GPU that you can buy right now?
Well, NVIDIA's worth $1 trillion right now.
But yeah, they have like limited supply, right? They have limited.
Yeah, they have limited supply, so you're overpaying to get the entire output of their production line. You are like paying potentially twice as much as what other people would pay, but you're monopolizing the access to compute, and you're depriving your competitors of access to compute, which would give you a really huge competitive edge.
So your take is like buy all the compute.
Just buy all of the compute, yeah. Just raise enough to buy NVIDIA altogether. Obviously, that's not realistic.
I feel like the NVIDIA shares have been gone up recently. I think it's getting harder and harder to buy. Okay, maybe like if the NVIDIA shares increase,
it
doesn't need
NVIDIA. Yeah, that's not what they're going to do, but they're going to be able to bid for their production output and get a contract where they get, say, like the first 100,000, the first 200,000, the first 500,000 H100s that are produced. I think that would give you a really huge competitive advantage because you can build out your data center, your compute clusters before everybody else, and that allows you to train the bigger model before everybody else. And there will eventually be some model that is so powerful that it significantly speeds up the time it takes for you to build the successor model, the one that comes after that one. And that's my definition of when takeoff starts, or when intelligence explosion kind of gets initiated, is when you have a model that is sufficiently powerful that it speeds up the rate at which you can build the next model, and gives you a competitive advantage over everybody else in the space because they don't have such a model. That's a tangent.
So you get all the compute and then you build the best model, and they cannot train it because they don't have compute.
Your competitors?
Yeah.
Yeah, so your competitors, if they don't have compute because you bought the entire supply of compute, then they aren't going to even be able to train a competitor model to yours. I think this is highly unrealistic, and NVIDIA would never do this because it would like break all of their relationships with all of these huge companies that are much bigger than OpenAI. So yeah, I just want to say this is like a fantasy. This is not happening, but if I, had all the power in the world and I ran OpenAI, this is something I would be trying to get as close to as possible.
Wait, so you both have all the power in the world and run OpenAI, or just run
Just
OpenAI?
if I ran OpenAI and, could determine what they would do, I would try and get as close to monopolizing compute as I can. Because the best researchers are going to want to train on the biggest clusters to do the most interesting work. And if you can monopolize access to those super large clusters, then you can also monopolize access to the very best researchers in some sense. Maybe not exactly.
So now let's say you're still the CEO of OpenAI, but you don't get the money. You try to raise, but you don't raise more than $10 billion. What's the next step? What's the next thing you do?
I would not invest so heavily in inference, and I would invest a lot more in just training the successor model, because you're going to use the demonstration of the capabilities of that model to show how close you are to AGI and raise the next bigger round and hopefully raise 100 billion the next time.
So this YouTube channel is about AI risk, right? And so you're just like talking about how you're just like want to make big models and train huge models and raise a lot of money. So if you're a CEO of OpenAI, you would be like
the worst.
a huge threat.
Yeah, accelerationist, like to the max. That's not who I am. I actually think we should like slow down and be really safe. I also think that like OpenAI is the only one that has seemingly taken things very seriously when it comes to safety. A lot of people criticize Sam Altman going around the world on this tour.
Why do they criticize him?
They say that it's just to impose regulation to slow down competitors. They say that it's just to meet powerful people so we can raise more money. Some of these things might be true. However, it's also the only way to really get feedback from the entire culture of the world into what these systems should do and how they should behave. And it shouldn't just be a small group of people in the Bay Area who decide what these super powerful models.
Who should decide it?
I agree with OpenAI that it should be like a collective decision from the whole world. And I think, to look more favorably on what Sam Altman was doing by taking that world tour, it was to gather some of that information and hear from all these different people and all these different cultures.
So do you think he's also like trying to, like impose regulation on other companies to keep the edge?
Sure. Maybe on some level. I think that OpenAI is also the only company with this interesting structure, and a lot of people criticize the structure and say it's for profit. I don't agree with that. I really think that it is a non-profit, but they have to raise huge amounts of money, and they can do it by promising people that they will pay them back up to some specific amount, but not up to infinity.
Yeah, it's just like a capped profit, right? Is it 10x, 20x, or 200x? I forgot.
It started at 100x. Altman had mentioned in some interviews that it's come down since then because they're more real now than they were back then. I think that, it really makes sense, everything that they're doing. And, despite what people say on Twitter, I actually think that they're behaving as I would if I was just trying to maximize the positive outcomes for humanity. And additionally, something I want to comment on here is, if OpenAI really wants to achieve their mission, they have to win. They have to like decisively win the race to AI.
Do they? So you think OpenAI has to win for us to be safe?
I think, they're the only ones that are taking things very seriously.
What about DeepMind, Anthropic? Are they not taking AI risk? Like they don't have AI risk teams?
Just the fact that they're a for-profit company that can profit into infinity and are structured that way scares me. They just haven't done the things that OpenAI has done to really prove that, they're incentivized to behave in this way that is best for all of us.
What OpenAI has done is also like push like a lot of the largest models and a lot of the hype that we're seeing right now with ChatGPT is like, or before that GPT-3 or GPT-2, like all this momentum around building AGI came from releasing those not releasing those models weights publicly because this was kind of like staged, right? But kind of like showing the world that like skill is all you need and you can like go faster, right?
I think that's a valid criticism that they are pushing these race dynamics to exist, that they really created the race dynamics by releasing ChatGPT and GPT-4. I think that's fair, but from their perspective, they need to raise money if they want to actually compete on the largest scales of compute. And the only way that they probably saw that they could raise the amount of money they needed was by putting these things out in the public and showing how far along they actually are. In creating something that's like economically valuable that generates revenue.
And so you're thinking that they were just like trying to do their best at generating revenue, and but they really want to build safe AI, and you want them to win. And if they win, you think that's like your best outcome for you being alive in like 50 years.
I think that if they did monopolize compute, which is, not a realistic goal for them, but if they could get closer to that and just put themselves so far out ahead that other companies kind of see the writing on the wall, they realize that they can't really compete with OpenAI, and instead they decide to maybe work together or invest in OpenAI so they can get part of those profits rather than getting nothing. I think that would be probably the best outcome, where people consolidate and say, OpenAI is so far ahead, like we should just support them and try and get try and profit off of their success rather than trying to compete with them, burn a ton of money and probably not be able to compete with them in the end. I think if OpenAI is sufficiently far ahead, it'll create that sort of an environment, or at least
a safe space.
What's that?
A safe environment. If we can have like 2 years to think if they're 2 years ahead.
I think if they're far enough ahead, people will maybe stop competing, and that will subdue the race dynamics. That
is this actually what has been happening? Because like with ChatGPT or GPT-4, it seems like it made the race much stronger. Like it seemed like the more they show that they're in lead, and the more companies try to catch, and the more money is raised to catch them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it makes things worse, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair point. How would I take the more like favorable stance on this? Yeah, I guess this is why I just think they should raise way more money than they already have. The fact that Inflection has raised $1.3 billion is, that's a significant fraction of what OpenAI has raised.
Then that like moves the threshold, that moves the like average of investments. Like, so if OpenAI raises 10 billion,
mm-hmm.
then all the other companies can be like, oh, give me 1 billion because it's like only 10% of OpenAI, right? And so like the more money they raise, and the more like it becomes like easy for other companies to be like, oh, like OpenAI has 10 billion. Oh, they have like 100 billion. We can just like have like 1% of this or 10% of this.
Yeah, I think that the scale up of investment is going to happen anyway because of the race dynamics that exist. The races might happen a little bit faster if OpenAI raised 100 billion. But I think that it's a better scenario for all of us if there's one clear leader that is very far ahead of everybody else than if there are many companies that are very close to the same level of competency. The idea that, OpenAI came out with GPT-3, and then after some period, Google came out with Palm that was more powerful than GPT-3, and then OpenAI comes out with 4, which is more powerful than Palm, like where they're kind of always just neck and neck and they're just one-upping each other slowly. That seems like a bad scenario. I would prefer a company that's just very far ahead, where they are able to come out with a successor model before other people are even able to match their previous model.
To move to another topic, what do you think is like what kind of like risk do you think is like underappreciated, like things that you think like safety-wise we should pay more attention on? Because we've been talking about like how to scale models and how to like invest more and buy more compute, but like safety-wise, what do you think we could do today? Are you pro more governance, more regulation? You're pro doing more alignment research? What kind of like research do you know? What kind of if you know any, it's fine not to know anything.
Yeah, Well, I definitely am pro alignment research. Like, let's put as much into that as possible. But I really had issues with the red teaming effort for GPT-4. I didn't like that they tried to see if it could escape into the wild, into the internet. And I don't think that they should do that for future models. I think it's extremely dangerous to test if your model can escape into the wild, because eventually there will be a model that is powerful enough to do that.
I think there were some sandboxing it, right?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with how they went about it, but I would just urge red teamers to not...
To not red teams?
No, to not test if the model can do something that, if it succeeds at doing that, it could, cause humanity to go extinct. Because if it could do that thing, then you just initiated it doing that. And so I just don't want to see that.
Anything else?
On alignment. Yeah, I wish some of the...
What makes you worried? Like, how worried are you about AI killing you? Like, if you were to give like a percentage, could be like very high variance, whatever, but
yeah, I think
an interval.
Yeah, I think if I were to die in the next 40 years, there's a greater than, I don't know, 5%, let's just throw up a number, chance that it's because of AGI. But
95% chance of like you living in a utopia created by AI?
No, I don't think it would be a utopia. Yeah, I see AGI as being this thing that gives wealthy people enormously more power because now they can just buy intelligence for themselves. And so it will just dramatically increase inequality between the rich and the poor, because the rich will be able to purchase superintelligence for themselves and everybody else will just be normal humans or have a much less powerful model that they can access.
Right, so you see the kind of like the same world as we're in right now, but people have like access to more powerful AGIs.
Extreme. Yeah, vastly more extreme world that is somewhat similar to what we have now, but where like ultra rich people basically become superintelligences and the rest of us kind of stay as like mortal humans.
And when they become superintelligences, what do? Do they just like expand through space? Do they just like stay here?
I'm not going to speculate on what like a superintelligence would do, because
there's like
sounds silly in retrospect. Like that a human would say about it.
You said you've read superintelligence, right? There's like a lot of things we can expect it to do, which is grabbing more resources to achieve his goal, or like building Dyson spheres. They seem like reasonable.
Yeah,
right?
I think like the Dyson sphere is way too specific of an assumption.
Like catching energy from space.
Yeah, like you could maybe guess it would consume energy. But like I think it will be so different from us. It would be like, a mouse or an ant trying to like guess about human behavior and the types of actions humans would take. It's just going to be so far beyond us that it's kind of pretty much impossible to speculate about how it will behave. There was something I wanted to mention about alignment. Oh yeah. I think the doomers should put more.
So you're not a doomer because you keep saying doomer. So you're.
Oh, I guess.
Are you an EAC then?
No, I guess I am a doomer in some sense, but I just I kind of love the term.
You're 5%. You're 5% doomer.
I'm like 50% doomer.
But why do you say more than 5%?
Why don't I say 50%?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I should say 50%, like that I die from superintelligence. I don't know if like die is the right word. It could just be like you're in a significantly reduced position than the superintelligences are, and you kind of don't get to do anything interesting in the world. And that's kind of similar.
Have you read Paul Christiano's post, like My Views on Doom, where he gives like different scenarios? One is like the future is like irreversibly messed up. For some reason, like the value is locked in, and we cannot really like expand through the stars or like get a lot of the value we could have gotten if the model was aligned. And like AI taking over and killing everyone or most people is like only like a one sub scenario, but not all the scenarios like about doom, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think humanity dying is one doom scenario, but there are maybe many. One thing I would like to say about people working on alignment or people who are worried about AI takeover is that I really think if we're going to have any chance at controlling AGI or aligning an AGI, we're going to have to use the most powerful AI tools of that era to do it. And I think we'll want to have something that's like a mild superintelligence, like maybe 2 Einsteins, to help align what will be 5 Einsteins, and then that will help align what will be 10, and kind of just scaling up, trying to control it the whole way. But I think like automated alignment is going to be super important, and we should focus more on how we're going to use AI systems to align even more powerful AI systems. I think we will be able to control like the initial ones that are just a little smarter than humans, and we'll be able to use those and deploy them at a huge scale in parallel to help come up with alignment solutions for the next generation systems. And to me, that seems like the most plausible path for aligning superintelligence. Kind of seems like the only viable path to me.
So basically, we build like incrementally smarter agents that can like make sure that other AIs that are slightly smarter or bigger like are aligned, and we
yeah, I think we
build this like tower of turtles.
Yeah, and it probably won't be very stable, and maybe it blows up at some point. That's probably very likely. I think those first systems will be really dangerous because they'll be about as smart as a human, maybe a little bit smarter, but they'll be like way faster, and you can deploy them in parallel towards whatever you want. I think they will follow instructions really well. I think we're very good at aligning current systems to follow instructions. And I think because of that, we'll be able to direct them towards the correct goals, especially if they're not like open source. And so, OpenAI could take this model that's a little bit smarter than a human and deploy like 100,000 of them towards solving alignment problems for the next generation system. I think that's kind of like the only plausible path towards solving alignment.
Like make them follow instructions, like
they already are instruction fine-tuned. Right. The large language models already follow instruction.
But the better they are at following instructions, the more aligned they are. At some point, with this like same
no, I think
method,
you can just direct them to solve alignment problems. I don't think they're like more aligned because they follow instructions. I think what we really want them to do is continue to follow instructions and understand our intent.
So you're bullish on the OpenAI alignment plan of like using AIs to help us solve alignment?
I wouldn't say that I'm like super optimistic. I just think that it's the only plausible path. Yeah.
You're not optimistic, but this thing is the only thing that's going to work.
Yeah, but I don't think we have time to solve it on our own. I think that we're going to have to use like mild superintelligence or, mild AGI to solve the problem for us.
What if the like models that are going to help us solving alignment, they have like some small bias or like small like it's not really agency, but like small goals or something in their weights that like push them towards like us not solving alignment or like deceiving us. Like at some point, as we get something like that is like as capable as a human and like able to like actually help us solve alignment, we're going to have stuff that's capable of deceiving us, right?
Yes, but I think we will through RLHF, we will push them to not do that and to follow our instructions more directly and to not try to deceive us. These models are trained through gradient descent. They are trying to find like the shortest or like the steepest slope towards doing what we want them to do or getting their reward. And I think that like deceiving us or doing what we don't want is like not the way that they achieve their reward most optimally. I think that for these initial kind of dumber systems, just by doing what we want, that will continue to be the best way that they can achieve their reward and optimize themselves. And so I don't think it's super realistic to think that like you have this thing that has been following your instructions and it behaves well, but then, all of a sudden it crosses some threshold and it just like throws a switch and now it's like deceiving you and doing all these other things.
Right. So I think another way of looking at this is like if for some reason there's like some way the feedback isn't good or there's like some mistakes or sometimes it's like rewarded to like help us in a way where like saying the wrong thing or pretending he's done the task where he doesn't really has done the task. like where like shortcuts are rewarded, it might end up behaving in a way that is like deceitful because he's been like rewarded for these like specific cases, and it's very hard to not like make a mistake or like have those like tiny cases that like happen like 1 in 1,000 times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as it's like a small amount of times where it's rewarded for doing those like bad things,
mm-hmm.
it will kind of like be pushed towards this direction.
Yeah, it could be like slightly pushed in that direction. I think that'll really just look like noise in the training data. And so I think that might happen a little bit, but I don't think that on the kind of weak superintelligences, the ones that are only slightly smarter than us, I don't think that slight deviation that will really just look like noise in the training data, I don't think that will pose an existential risk on systems that are not extremely powerful. Those first systems will be very powerful in that they will be a little smarter than a human, and you'll be able to run them super quickly, and you'll be able to deploy them in parallel on a huge scale. That's what will make them dangerous. But I don't think like individually those mild superintelligences will pose an existential threat because of that slight noise in the training data.
So you think at the moment we deploy a lot of very smart systems that can like cooperate or like communicate through the internet, then that's the moment things could get out of hand. But if we just have like one system on its own, it's not going to be like pushed in some kind of like deceitful behavior or...
No, because it will be trained to follow our instructions. And I think it will do that. And there might be some noise in the training data that causes it to take like minor shortcuts. But I don't think that those minor shortcuts will cause a very, very mild superintelligence, like only slightly smarter than humans, like 2 Einsteins or something. I don't think that would pose an existential threat.
I think that's like one place where I disagree. I think if we get like 2 Einstein...
Well, maybe we have a different definition of what 2 Einsteins is.
Right. I guess do you count as Einstein at human speed or at... like, because if Einstein was running on CPU and GPUs... He would go like very fast into like building new AIs, right? He would just like... So I guess my overall take is like as long as we have something like slightly human level with the like computer speed and inference speed, etc., we could
deploy it at huge speed and
it would like self-improve quickly. That's my take. Like as long as we reach like human level, it would like... There's like a lot of like different counter arguments for this, but roughly that's my take.
Yeah, it would like need to harness its compute cluster and collect even more data to train itself on to make itself more powerful. But then that next system it builds is not even going to be like the same model. And it's the system that we did build was trained to follow our instructions. So this thing would be very clearly going against like its entire architecture, which seems implausible to me. I think those systems, while you could run them really fast, you could also just choose to run them more slowly. And that will really be in the hands of the people who have that first sort of mild superintelligence system. They will be able to determine how quickly they want to run it. If it runs like an LLM and it's just generating text and maybe it's agentic and to some degree, but you could probably slow down how quickly it can do things and what it's doing.
I guess I have like counter arguments on like how hard it is to actually control it, even if you're like a team of like well-intentioned like engineers at like a top lab or something. Because I think, as I said, the thing about like badly rewarding like sometimes made it like push it to be like slightly deceitful. But another counterpoint is more like for like stuff like auto GPT, okay. The main pull request. The highest like top voted pull request at some point was, how do we build self-improving AI law? And people were like commenting on like how do we like make it go faster and how do we like make it self-improve and like so I think okay, there's like you could say that like most of the compute comes from top AI labs and people in open source will not have the compute to like actually build this by themselves. But I'm just saying like there will be some people who will just like YOLO the hell out of training those kind of things. And won't really care about controlling anything.
My expectation is when, let's say it's OpenAI, has a model that is, roughly human level or slightly above human level, they're going to take a long time before they put that out into the wild. And so these YOLO type people aren't going to have access to that system. And
it's YOLO V3.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, maybe that could go ugly. I just think that the biggest labs are going to have this system all to themselves for a while, and they're going to be careful at first about how they go about using it. And yeah,
Do you think Google will be careful?
Hey, I think it like depends who at Google is really in the driving seat there, and I don't know those people personally, so I can't speak to their values or how they'll behave. But the way that they're incentivized doesn't make me super optimistic compared to OpenAI. But I think they could, they're still humans. They probably want what's best for themselves and the people around them and the broader world. So I'd hope they would make the right decisions there and collaborate with people outside of their organization.
Do you think there's like people who have bad intentions that could like actually misuse AI systems to like, cause nuclear threats or like create new pathogens or like things that are like even more dangerous and doesn't require like very smart AI?
Definitely. Yeah, I would be worried about, what projects are happening in secret. Like right up the road, we have the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Yeah. And, they get their funding from the Department of Energy, and no one knows what they're working on in secret. They have a lot of public projects, but these federally funded things, these defense-funded projects could be really dangerous, and they could be pursuing things more like what you're describing. And if they have a monopoly on compute, that would be very scary. Yeah, I don't know what they would build.
That's the only dangerous thing. Is like if you have the monopoly on compute, that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I'd be worried if like the defense agencies in this country or any country around the world were to be the ones with the monopoly on compute that built the first AGIs. I could see why they would want to build the first AGIs, because obviously, like militarily, from a defense perspective, having an AGI would give you like a decisive strategic advantage over every other country in the world. So they're highly incentivized to build it. I just really hope that they're not for some reason. Like maybe they're just they don't really believe in superintelligence and they're more of that type, but they probably do believe in superintelligence and they probably do care. Yeah.
Like it seems that right now, like it's very hard not to believe in at least like human level AI. If you like work in a white collar job and your job is like somehow automated by ChatGPT or GPT-4, it's like hard to believe that this thing cannot at some point replace you or like have some tremendous impact.
I agree. And then it should be a really easy and obvious step that once you have a piece of software that can be deployed in parallel as many times as you want and be ran super quickly on your compute, that you could not use that system if you're already saying it's at human level to make more research progress or help design, faster chips or just scale out your compute clusters or create better algorithms, and that you could, like, you only have to make some progress with each iteration to get to superintelligence from human level AI. So as long as your next generation system's like a little bit more powerful, it's already then beyond human level, and you can use that system to help build the next one.
What do you mean by like if it's at some small amount smarter than human, then it's like so you need something human level, right?
For what?
For helping you build more advanced systems.
Not necessarily. You could definitely use narrow AI to help you design better chips or better architect your data centers or help design faster algorithms or search a very large space of algorithms to find faster ones, or just to read through the existing research out there and better like consolidate all of the best practices for training larger models. You don't need something that's at human level. And that's why I'm somewhat scared about where we're at, because we already have extremely powerful systems, and some of them might be powerful enough to start in a very meaningful way contributing towards the inputs of the next generation systems. And I think that that's all you really need to initiate like a takeoff to vastly more powerful models.
Because you get this like positive self-reinforcing loop where
Yeah, and like some of that sounds really sci-fi and is like rightfully criticized. I think that the iteration times would still be like measured in years. I don't think it's going to be, in a week it's going to be twice as powerful, because you're like, say you come up with a better algorithm to train the next model, you still need to actually train it, and that might take months or years. And if it's more of like compute improvements that are what get the job done, then that really takes years, because you need to manufacture all of those chips and then actually install them into a data center.
Yeah, so I think there's like all the like infrastructure and like hardware part, and then there's like all the like our ideas harder to find, and like how much like diminishing returns you get from like like the more capable your AI systems are, how much harder it is to like build slightly smarter AIs. Like, is the scaling curve like straight or not? Yeah,
is what you're asking. Oh, okay.
Is it like a straight line on a log plot, or like does it like start diminishing at some point?
That's a question we just don't know. I think that it would be really surprising to me if we like asymptoted at some level that was below human capabilities and weren't able to make significant progress beyond that, because there are just so many inputs to the model's performance that we could push on.
So many ways we could, like easy ways we could improve right now.
Yeah, there's just so many ways.
I think he's like the CEO of Crow. I was saying something like that. Like he's like very bullish on AGI being soon, because he just like sees so many like obvious ways of improving his models.
Exactly, I totally agree with that. And I even think things outside of the base model. I was talking earlier about kind of this orchestra of tools that the model could use, and you could fine tune it to use those better. And I think that could make the performance go up quite enormously without even needing to retrain a new base model in ways that could be surprising to people.
I think we've talked a lot about a lot of different things. It was great to have you. Do you have, if I can recall correctly, after talking to you, I saw an email notification saying I had a new Patreon, but I'm not sure if it was you or someone else.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, I'm paying for your rent now.
You're paying for my Berkeley. No. Now I'm going to get a Berkeley rent. So you're contributing to maybe helping me record those videos. Yeah, off the cuff in the campus of Berkeley. So thanks you for that. Do you have as a Patreon and maybe as a subscriber, do you have like any message to the other subscribers? Any take on AI? Any like personal feeling about AI or?
Hey, yeah, like sign off remarks to all of these subscribers. Pay him more money, of course. That's like the obvious one. Yeah, try to contribute whatever you can. I think like we're somewhat close to AGI, and so you might not have like a tremendous amount of time to position yourself to contribute, but
what's the like obvious ways to contribute? Like the easy ways?
I think just donate your time. Like if you can't donate your money, donate your time to different efforts that are in the direction of alignment and safety. I think it's important to just help more general people understand what's happening in the world and where things might go. I know it's really easy to sound like a crazy person when you have those discussions, so you got to like really ease people into it. Don't like throw full superintelligence in their face right away.
What do you throw? Do you throw like human level AI, or do you throw like capable system that might like automate some fraction of your work?
Yeah, I would just say, things are going to improve. Try GPT-4, spend like several hours with it. And I would explain some really precise ways that the system will improve that are very understandable to people, and that are believable, that aren't like really exaggerated.
So concrete examples of how things can improve, and maybe some concrete examples of how things could fail. I think it was like the conversation between like Andrew Ng and Joshua Benjo. They tried to like come up with like concrete failure modes in the sense of like how AIs could be like misaligned or like misbehave, and like if you can point out to like specific examples of how things fail, that might be like less crazy to like AI researchers or even like policymakers, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if like pushing people into a panic, like the general public into a panic about doom scenarios for AI, or would create like a good environment.
It's not like a doom. It's not like a doom scenario. It's more like technical challenges or like technical, like see everything we've talked about, but like map out into papers and actual like empirical data that these models can actually misbehave, and not just like possibly there's a chance of this thing being misaligned, but like actually demoing the ways it can like be misaligned or.
Yeah, the thing I say to people that feels most natural and is really understandable is that humans dominate the world because of our intelligence. If we have a system that's significantly more intelligent than us, it would be like an unstable situation for humans to be controlling that system. It would be a much more stable environment for that system to be controlling us. That's kind of just the natural place that things would go. And I think people understand that. And that kind of sets up an understanding for doom, because it basically just describes humans being disempowered and the much smarter machines of the future kind of controlling the world. And then they can kind of come to their own conclusions from that. Again, like I don't like to bury people in like a giant tidal wave of like AI, like niche AI Twitter information, you know.
But Twitter is the reason why I'm here today with you. And if you're a subscriber watching this video and you're in the Bay, which means Berkeley and San Francisco, basically, Oakland doesn't exist. You're much like I would really appreciate if you just like want to hang out and record any sort of videos together. Just reach out to me on Twitter, and maybe I will come to you like I did with Jack.
Yeah,
the 1 hour train to record a small chat. And yeah, if you work especially in alignment, language models, any sort of AI topic, could be like RL, vision, or whatever, and even applications. I'm like really likely to just come to you and have a chat in this next month. Thanks a lot, Jack, and maybe see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for coming all this way.
Okay.
Awesome.